Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is something quite atrocious. If you say it loud enough, you'll always sound precocious. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Because I was afraid to speak when I was just a lad. My father gave me nails a tweak, told me I was bad. But then one day I learned a word that saved me aching nose.
The biggest word you ever heard, and this is how it goes. Oh,
supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is something quite atrocious. If you say it loud enough, you'll always sound precocious. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
He traveled all around the world, and everywhere he went, he'd use his word and all would say, there goes a clever gent.
When Dukes and Martha Rogers pass a time of day with me, I say me special word and then they ask me out to tea.
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious, even though the sound of it is something quite atrocious. If you say it loud enough, you'll always sound precocious. Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. You know, you can say it backwards, which is docious expiastic fragicalirupus, but that's going a bit too far, don't you think? So when the cat has got your tongue, there's no need for dismay. Just summon up this word and then you've got a lot to say. But better use it carefully or it could change your life.
For example?
Yes?
One night I said it to me girl, and now me girl's me wife. Oh, and a lovely thing she is too. She is
Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. 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 Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious.
Good evening, I'm Dave Schwartz with you for the next 2 hours. This is Cinema Showcase and then Spotlight on a Star. On tonight's program, we're going to be featuring the music of the Sherman Brothers. They're my guests, Richard and Robert. Welcome to Cinema Showcase.
Well, thank you, Dave. Glad to be here.
It's great to be here. This is Dick, and that's Bob over there.
Okay, one of the songs we started off with was Supercalifragilisticexpialidocious from Mary Poppins, a song that you wrote. Where did you come up with the word?
Well, actually, that goes back a long ways. We actually went to camp way back in the 30s. And in summer camp, kids were going around saying, what's a bigger word than anti-disestablishmentarianism? And they said, there's another word, and the word is similar to the word we use in the song, and that is supercalifragilisticexpialidocious. That was the word we'd heard. And it was just one of these silly nonsense things. Now,
they seem to, that word seemed to remain with us, and years and years later, when we were trying to figure out what kind of gift could Mary Poppins give the children that's more important than anything else, and that they can take from the world of imagination into the world of reality, a word like supercalifragilisticexpialidocious seemed the most natural thing for her to give them.
So we sort of shaped the word into docious so we could rhyme it with atrocious and precocious, and wrote a song around it.
Do you have any other long words?
Well, we've written actually written a lot of songs with words that have a little more interest than just the basic everyday usable words. We made up a few like fortuosity for The Happiest Millionaire, and gratifaction for Tom Sawyer, phantasmagorical for Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, and a new one in the new picture we've just come out with called The Slipper and the Rose, and that picture has a song in it called Protocolagorically Correct.
Well, we'll find out about the origin of that word. But we're going to be doing Slipper and the Rose tonight. We're going to be hearing some of the other music you've done. Right now, we've got another selection from Mary Poppins. This was the one that won the Oscar, didn't it? Chim Chim Cheree?
Right.
Now, who writes the lyrics to the songs and who writes the music, or is that a collaboration?
Dick and I collaborate. We don't like to think about it.
Yeah, we just work together, and whatever comes out is our mutual work. But I would say that Chim Chim Cheree was one of these songs that we were looking for word sounds. I mean, it was one of those things we really wanted to get a song that had kind of more of a sound to it, that would be more than just a story about chimney sweep, but kind of create within the sound of the words its own little magic. And so when we came up with the onomatopoeia, which is what this play on words is, it just sounded so absolutely right. We felt that was perfect for Bert, and we were very fortunate to get Dick Van Dyke to play Bert, and we had the fabulous Julie Andrews to play Mary Poppins, and we had quite a marvelous cast in that picture.
As Walt told us after we won the Oscars, he said that we had a home run with bases loaded. So the next time, when you get to that, just try to get on base.
Yeah, because you don't always get that kind of a cast.
And since it's baseball season, I thought I'd bring it up.
chimney, chimney, chim-chiree. A sweep is as lucky can be. Chimney, chimney, chim-chiroo. Good luck, we're a buff when I shake hands with you. Or blow me a kiss, and that's lucky too. Now as the ladder of life has been strung, you might think a sweep's on the bottommost rung. Though I spends me time in the ashes and smoke, in this all wide world there's no happier bloke. Chimney, chimney, chim-chiree. A sweep is as lucky can be. Chimney, chimney, chim-chiroo. Good luck, we're off when I shake hands with you. Chimney, chimney, chim-chiree. A sweep is as lucky can be. Chimney, chimney, chim-chiroo. Good luck, we're off when I shake hands with you. I choose me bristles with pride, yes I do. A broom for the shop and a brush for the flu.
Oh, it's awfully dark and gloomy up there.
There now, you see how wrong people can be? That there is what you might call a doorway to a place of enchantment. Up where the smoke is all billowed and curved, between pavement and stars is the chimney sweep world. When there's hardly no day, nor hardly no night, there's things off in shadow and off way in light. On the rooftops of London, cool, what a sight.
Chim chimney, chim chimney, chim chiree. When you're with a sweep, you're in glad company.
Nowhere is there a more happier crew
And them what sings chim chiree, chiroo. Chim chimney, chim chiree, chiroo.
From Mary Poppins, Dick Van Dyke, and Julie Andrews. And get out the music before we go into the next track there. Okay, I noticed in reading your biography, you have written several top 10 songs. I believe that's where you got your start in the 50s. What songs?
Oh, well, let's see. First of all, we actually were writing, at the beginning of the 50s, we were even doing country and western songs, but in the late 50s, we actually sort of came into our own with a young lady named Annette Funicello, who was one of the gals on the Mouseketeers show, and a wonderful young lady she is. And she sang a song of ours called Tall Paul, He's My All. And that became a big #1 song, and after that we followed that with Pineapple Princess for her, and Jojo the Dog-Faced Boy, Wild Willie. And then we had a streak of songs with Annette, and we branched out and wrote for other people, and one of the biggest songs we had in the late 50s, early 60s was a song called You're 16, You're Beautiful, and You're Mine. Originally it was with Johnny Burnett, the late Johnny Burnett, and then just recently Ringo Starr made it a #1 song all over again, which we're thrilled about. And one of our early songs also that was written in the rock and roll style because of the fact that it was called for in a script was one of the first pictures. I believe it was the first picture.
It was the first picture we did, The Parent Trap.
At Disney, we did a series of songs for that picture. It required a lovely, nostalgic, old-fashioned ballad, and it required a very kind of now song that these two identical twins would sing as if they'd made it up to intrigue their parents into finding each other again and getting back together again. And the name of the song was, a not too gentle hint, it was called Let's Get Together, Yay, Yay, Yay. And we wrote it in such a way that Haley Mills, playing two parts, could sing it with herself. And it became an incredibly successful song. We never thought of it in terms of a commercial hit. We always thought it would be a cute sequence song for the picture. And never thinking about it more than that, it was rather astounding when we found out that kids were walking into the theaters with tape recorders and taping it off.
And they would send letters to Disney Studios requesting copies of the record. And since there was no plan for it to be released, they were forced into be released.
And so finally, the little song that Haley, with her cute little pipey voice, she certainly wasn't a rock singer, became the #1 hit not only here but in Japan, in England, in Australia, every place. And it was Let's Get Together, Yay, Yay, Yay.
Let's get together, yeah, yeah, yeah. Why don't you and I come by? Let's get together, what do you say? We could have a swinging time. We'd be a crazy team. Why don't we make the scene together? Oh, let's get together, yeah, yeah, yeah. Think of all that we could share. Let's get together every day, everywhere and everywhere. I know we haven't got a lot. We could be sharing all we've got together. Oh, I really think you're swell. We really ring the bell. Ooh-wee. And if you stick with me, nothing could be great to say, hey, alligator, let's get together, yeah, yeah, yeah. Two is twice as nice as one. Let's get together right away. We'll be having twice the fun, and you can always count on me. A gruesome twosome we will be. Let's get together, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Haley Mills, who was always one of my idols when I was growing up watching those movies. I think I've seen every one of her movies about 4 or 5 times.
She's a very, very gifted young lady.
And a very talented young stage actress.
How many Disney films did you do?
27.
What was the first one?
The first one that was released was a song we had done for the Absent-Minded Professor, followed shortly by The Parent Trap. That was the second one.
So that would be about 1960, 61?
60, 61, right.
How did you become associated with Disney? How did you get into Disney?
It was because of our little lucky charm, Annette Funicello. He had heard of all the hits we were making for her, or contributing to, and he asked that we come up to the studio and meet with him, and he wanted to see if we could write a song for her first show for television that would be shot in England. Well, when we came up there, we knew what the story was about, some horses, and we brought along about 3 different versions of a song. And Walt talked for half an hour when we first met about this picture where these 2 girls never met, and little girl Haley Mills is in it. And we said, well, we don't understand what you're talking about. We came here with a song for Annette Funicello. He said, oh, well, let's hear it. And Dick played it for him and sang it, and Walt said, that'll work. And that's about the nicest thing he could say.
We learned later on that when he said that'll work, that's about as big a compliment as you're going to get, because that meant that he's willing to put his stamp of approval onto a piece of a major production, $2, $3, $4, $5 million production. That was very, very big compliment to creative people that worked for him. But actually, the irony of the whole thing was we felt later on, after we had hindsight, that Walt kind of sensed that we would be right for the Haley Mills film too. So he kind of inveigled us, because after he liked the song we did for Annette, he said, now that you heard the story about the Parent Trap picture, why don't you take a whack at that song? And that turned out to be Let's Get Together.
How many other Haley Mills films did you do the music for?
We did 4 of them. We did the first one was The Parent Trap. The second was a film we did that she did in England, which we wrote 3 or 4 songs for, called In Search of the Castaways, which co-starred the late great Maurice Chevalier. And subsequent to that, we did a film back at the studio again called Summer Magic with Burl Ives and Dorothy McGuire, and Haley, of course, heading the cast. And then the last film we did was in '65 with Haley, and that was her last film at the studio, That Darn Cat. And in That Darn Cat, she didn't sing any of the songs, but there was a title song that Bobby Darin sang.
Now, what were some of the other Disney films we haven't covered yet that we should get a mention in for?
Oh my goodness, let's see, Jungle Book, the Winnie the Pooh series, which is now a feature.
The Happiest Millionaire.
The Happiest Millionaire, let me see, The Aristocats, Bedknobs and Broomsticks. We got a couple of Academy nominations out of that one. And, there's so many. It's, when you sort of sit down and think about it, give me my my bio, I'll tell you.
Well, one of these days, as we move on in Cinema Showcase, we'll start getting into more and more of your scores and have you back, and we'll cover a lot of them.
Great.
Now, after you left Disney, what were some of the films that you did the music for?
The first one we did was Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. We did that for Albert Broccoli.
Yeah, we did in London. That was very exciting. That was the first time we'd been in another country to do a film, and it was terrific. We had Dick Van Dyke again. He was wonderful, and Sally Ann Howes, a wonderful, wonderful talent, and an all-British cast, quite remarkable people. And Chitty Chitty Bang Bang provided us with one of our first huge international hits in the title song, and that again was a nomination for an Academy Award. And then following that, we did 2 pictures for United Artists that were produced by the late Arthur Jacobs. He's most noted for having produced the
Planet of the Apes.
Planet of the Apes series. But this film, these 2 that we did were both based on the great works of Mark Twain. The first being Tom Sawyer, followed the following year by Huckleberry Finn.
Now, after those 2, where do we move on?
Well, we did several other animated things for other companies. We did...
Snoopy Come Home was one.
Yeah, we did that with the Charles Schultz characters, that everybody loves the Peanuts characters. And Snoopy was there, and Woodstock, the little bird, became a new character, which we introduced in that film. Charles Schultz is a remarkable and talented man.
Then we did a picture called Charlotte's Web, which was also animated.
That was produced by Hanna-Barbera, and they did a beautiful job of animating this classic. Everybody who has read the original material by White realizes that that book was absolutely incredible, and we were thrilled to be given the opportunity to do music for it, and we had a great cast in that. We had Debbie Reynolds and Paul Lynde and the late Agnes Moorehead.
Okay, moving on up to 1977, or actually 1976, I believe it was, you did a film called Slipper and the Rose.
Right.
Which is what we're going to get into now for about the next 40 minutes. And the first selection we're going to play is the main title. Would you like to make some comments before we hear it?
Yes, I would. I'd like to first of all say The Slipper and the Rose is a very new look at a great old story. The Cinderella story is the classic love story that everyone knows. But this time, in telling Cinderella, we've told it from a new point of view, the point of view of the prince. And in getting into this, a whole new area opened up in the story that nobody had ever thought about, looking into the background of the court, etc. And we had a fabulous cast, which we can get into as we go. One point before you play the overture is the fact that Bob and I are the songwriters, and we also co-wrote the script in this case. But the orchestrations and the conducting was done by a gifted musician named Angela Morley.
the main title from The Slipper and the Rose. My guests on Cinema Showcase tonight are Richard and Robert Sherman, two of the most talented songwriters around who've been writing music that has entertained millions of people over the last 15-20 years. And right now we're sort of spotlighting The Slipper and the Rose. Okay, I think we should mention right now who is the stars of The Slipper and the Rose.
Well, I think that primarily everyone in the United States would know Richard Chamberlain, the multi-talented young man who plays the Prince. Richard is a remarkable actor because he's not only achieved great success in his work in this country, but in England, he's appreciated and lauded for his great work in Shakespeare, in legit theater. He's played everything from Tennessee Williams' Streetcar. What is the most recent thing he did? It wasn't Streetcar. It was I forgot now. Well, it'll come back to me. He plays everything from Shakespeare to Tennessee Williams, and he does it so well. And the one thing people are not as aware of is the fact that he has a remarkable baritone singing voice. And in this film, he gets a chance to use it quite a bit. So that's Richard.
Now,
I think before we go on, mention who plays Cinderella. We've got a selection upcoming from Richard Chamberlain, Why Can't I Be Two People? So why don't we introduce that and then talk about the rest of the cast?
well, Richard has just come back from a long, or should we say the Prince has just returned to his castle and his family from a long trek to meet the daughter of a distant king, so that the families will have an alliance, get married. He'd get married with her. He found out that she had no teeth, and he didn't like her at all.
She was an old hag, and he's very disgruntled, and he comes back, and he's griping about the fact that he has to live this incredible life, and he sings this song, Why Can't I Be Two People?
Any simple peasant is afforded the ability in love to win or lose, while I of the nobility am robbed of the facility to choose. Any serf or servant can by natural selection elect himself a mate if she's amenable. But due to my high breeding, I'm continually acceding to demands I find increasingly untenable. All I ask, and it's a simple enough request, well, follow me, by all means follow me. I wish to know, I demand to know, why can't I be two people? Why can't I live two roles? Why can't one of me perform all the cloying amenities while the other me, twin brother me, be a free and happy soul? Why can't I be two people? Split myself right in half. Then I could satisfy and mollify and pacify and qualify, while the other me would have a hell of a healthy laugh. Ha! The custom of royalty in referring to oneself is to naturally employ the royal we. We are very happy, we are very sad, we are bored and suffer from ennui. For a royal prince there's no such word as me, it's always we. So rightfully I should be two or three. Don't you agree?
It's not for me to say, Your Royal Highness.
Perhaps not. So I ask myself, why can't I be two people? Why can't I play two parts? Why can't one of me endure the appalling formalities while the other me, twin brother me, have a free and happy heart? If I could be two people, life would not pass me by. I'd have a chance to pick and choose. I'd have a chance to win or lose. And maybe one of us would have a chance to live before we die.
That's The Slipper and the Rose. That's Richard Chamberlain singing. Who is it that sings with him there?
That was
Kenneth Moore.
Kenneth Moore.
He didn't sing, he just had a couple of lines in that particular. He does a number later on with Michael Hordern, which we'll get to, correct. I just remember the name of the play that I blacked out on was Night of the Iguana. He just finished doing that on Broadway. He played it out here also. And Richard is remarkable. I mean, that is quite a piece of performance in there. And he just goes striding through these vast halls of this castle, singing this song as naturally and with such great ease, and I was quite impressed with him. I really must say, I never expected he'd be that good. I knew he could do a lot of things, but the singing is remarkable.
Well,
Was the music recorded live as the movie was being taped, or was it recorded in the studio?
oh, it's always in the studio.
It is.
Pre-record. We always pre-record.
Okay, now we're down to Cinderella, and I'm having trouble pronouncing her name, so why don't you do it correctly?
Her name is Gemma Craven.
Gemma Craven.
Gemma Craven was a discovery of the producer of the film. The executive producer, by the way, was David Frost, the multi-talented, very active man of the world who does just about a little bit of everything. And he put this whole package together. But the line producer was a gentleman by the name of Stuart Lyons. And Stuart, in looking for talent for this, we wanted to get an unknown. We wanted to get somebody who really would have a Cinderella story of her own. And he was called by some people to see this young lady who was doing a performance of Threepenny Opera at the Bristol Old Vic Repertory Company. And he went up there and saw this performance of Threepenny Opera, and Gemma Craven was the young lady. And he was extremely well taken with her, brought her back and had her interviewed by Brian Forbes, who was the director of the film. And Brian was very impressed. David Frost was impressed. They sent us some recordings. We were still in the States then. And we heard her voice and were very impressed with her ability, her dramatic quality, as well as the sweetness of her. And gifted young 22-year-old girl who has an extensive amount of training in not only dance and acting, but also in singing. And it seemed like the logical choice. We went through many, many, many people till we found this girl who had this innate quality of purity, which we were looking for. Because a lot of gals are 22 and they look like they've been around, and too much around.
It's all right as long as it isn't on film.
And that's all right we had to have this quality of total naivete and innocence, and that would make the picture work. And so Gemma had this ability, and we were very pleased with her, and we thought she came off extremely well.
What has she been doing since the completion of the film?
Recently we heard that she received the equivalent of our Oscars in England for the film.
In acting work, she's been very busy on the stage. She's basically a legit actress, and she's just finished doing a season with one of the big rep companies. I don't know which.
Okay, on KCSN Northridge Cinema Showcase, right now we're going to move into a song which she sang called Once I Was Loved.
Once I Was Loved is a song that she sings near the grave of her parents. She is the character Cinderella, who of course is working as a scullery maid in the home where she lived as actually a very high-born young lady. And she's very unhappy, but she sings this song, which you get a feeling that she is very down, but she isn't, because she says this great strength of the love of her family is so important to her that she'll never really feel bad. And
it gives her hope and
to love her too.
Continuing on Cinema Showcase, we've heard from The Prince, we've now heard from Cinderella, and what's next?
Well, let's see now. Would we be getting into the crypt sequence?
Yes, we're moving down into the crypt. This show is sinking.
We like the crypt sequence.
Not the pits.
The crypt sequence is, of course, a little private inside joke, unless you've seen the picture. We have a sequence where the prince and his friend, who is played by Christopher Gable. American audiences would know Christopher Gable as the title character role in The Boyfriend. He's quite a remarkable guy. He dances, sings, and he was with the Sadler's Wells Ballet. He was one of the prime dancers. Now he's an actor, singer, and performer, all-around performer. But Chris Gable, and who was the prince's friend, and the prince, Richard Chamberlain, come into the family crypt, and he's the Prince of Euphranea. And he's discussing all these various deceased heads of the country.
You see, he goes to his crypt, and he sees that his name is on there, and the date he was born, and it's waiting for him till he dies. And when he dies, they'll finish it with another date.
And his big dream is to live the kind of a life that'll give him a little personal happiness and joy. And he doesn't want to just be a figure in a state where they're telling him who to marry and where to go and what to do. So he sings this song where he says, no matter what I do, I'll wind up in this hole in the ground. Can't I at least find a little happiness while I'm alive? And he sings this song, which is full of irony, and we hope that you really like our prince because of the fact that he sings. And it's called What a Comforting Thing to Know.
Good kings, bad kings, sane kings or mad. Protocol. Above all, makes a kingdom rise or fall. So we must be protocolically correct. Protocol. We respect, must be treated circumspect, else the kingdom will be wrecked. We've a system to protect, check and double check and protocolically Protocolically correct.
Okay, where did the word protegorically or whatever?
You know, and we know that there's a word called protocol. And the protocols are the way you treat VIPs in public affairs.
There's also the method by which you handle all kinds of public affairs and people of state, where you seat them. And these are the courtiers of the court of Euphranea. And by the way, the names of the characters playing these parts: Michael Hordern played the king, Kenneth Moore played the Lord Chancellor, and several other remarkably talented English character actors played the other roles. But principally, this was a kind of a fun put-down of this pomp and circumstance of the court. And Bob and I have had this kind of a kick about using big words anyhow. They're such fun, and if they basically mean something.
We got a real kick out of the Royal Command performance because we were there that night, and we were watching the Queen Mother, and she was laughing through this like you couldn't believe. So we felt we were home.
That was, by the way, one of the big thrills of our life was the fact that our film, The Slipper and the Rose, was last year's Royal Command performance, and we, as the co-creators of it, were invited to meet the royal family. And it was really kind of remarkable for a couple of fellows from Southern California to go over there and meet the royal family. I think, as Bob says, watching them laugh in the right places and cry in the right places meant a great deal to us. Of course, right now, with it playing here in Hollywood, it means a lot more at home because you want, your own peers and your own friends and everything to know of it. But it's had like 2 lives, this film so far. It's done extremely well in England and in Europe, like all parts of Europe. It is now opening to incredible success in Japan, of all places, and far off places like that. It played in New York. It broke every house record for the New York
Music Hall.
The Radio City Music Hall in New York, and it's just now opened at the Cinerama Dome in Hollywood, which we hope will be equally acceptable and equally accepted. But the main thing, of course, to Bob and myself is the fact that we've always tended to do G-rated material because we feel that if you can give people total involvement and total entertainment without having to stoop to having somebody's head chopped off, or have the mandatory sex scene, or have the mandatory violence with the cop chase at the end and 7 people jumping off a roof.
As our director, Brian Forbes, said, he's appalled by the pornographic violence, the pornography of violence. He said that's much worse than anything else that could be put on the screen.
And so Bob and I feel that there's a thing called fun and humor and love, and there's a lot of entertainment value in those properties. And so therefore we love doing Slipper in the Rose, because it was kind of that challenge of taking this classic old love story and making it into a new and exciting thing. We have wonderful people to work with. This next number is coming up, Suddenly It Happens, is a song that is initially stated by the fairy godmother.
Who I think has got to be one of the classic characters.
Thank you.
An overworked fairy godmother.
Fascinating woman, Annette Crosby.
Annette Crosby played it to a T, and what we did develop here was a no-nonsense fairy godmother who doesn't want to walk around with gossamer and glitter, because she figures everybody's going to know who she is then, and then know who's going to be worthy and who's going to be unworthy. Everybody's going to be on their good behavior. And so she has this great sense of kind of practicality. Her feet are right on the ground. She's very overworked. She's kind of embarrassed about the type of work she does. She says, "Don't ask me about it. It's a long story." And she's beautifully played by Annette Crosby. So Annette sings this song as she transforms Cinderella from the scullery char girl into this beautiful princess incognita. And then eventually the princess sings the song, and that's Cinderella, of course, and she sings the same song, and it becomes a whole new and glittery, exciting thing. And this is the song, Suddenly It Happens.
Back here on Cinema Showcase, I'm Dave Schwartz with you. And tonight my guests are Richard and Robert Sherman, who've written many musicals. Tonight one of them we're featuring, The Slipper and the Rose. And right now we've got another song. This is the waltz theme, isn't it?
This is the big theme that they actually, originally, all they do is waltz to it, and we never hear the words. But after the wonderful moment when the prince meets Cinderella, and then she runs away in the night as the clock strikes 12, she looks back at this castle high up on the mountain, and she thinks about how it felt to dance with her prince for the first time, and her feeling. Then we go into the castle, and there's the prince all by himself holding the glass slipper, and as he thinks about Cinderella, he sings his version of She Danced With Me, and it's the Slipper and the Rose Waltz.
Some great music from Slipper and the Rose. I think that has got to be one of the best movies I have seen in quite a while.
Well, thank you, Dave. It's wonderful of you to say it.
It certainly is.
What's upcoming for the Sherman Brothers now?
Well, we are just about ready to launch into a picture of perhaps the biggest star we've ever worked with. The name of the star is Lassie.
It's the first picture that Lassie's been in almost 26 years.
Lassie, of course, is the great, beautiful collie whom everybody knows and loves from the television series. Prior to that, she, of course, was on the MGM lot as a permanent fixture. She did about 5 pictures, starting with Lassie Come Home. But, of course, she hasn't done a feature film in a long time. This will be the first time Lassie will be in a picture featuring a lot of music.
Is it hard writing a song for a dog?
I knew you were going to say
Well,
that.
you're not original, you know. But actually, this is going to be scored with songs, the picture is, and about Lassie and about other people's thoughts about themselves and others, and it's really exciting.
It's all new characters. We've written the script as well. It's an original, our first original script. We've done a lot of adaptations like the Tom Sawyer and the Slipper and the Rose thing. But with the advent of this film, we are actually going for the first time with a whole original story by ourselves. And we have some wonderful people who are kind of heading up the project. The Rathers, Jack Rather and Bonita Granville Rather are the exec producers, and Hal Landers and Bob Roberts are the producers.
Now, before we get to the last selection we're going to hear on tonight's edition of Cinema Showcase, I want to make a special thanks to Richard and Robert for coming down here and being with us.
Thank you for having us, Dave.
Yes,
Really.
thank
And
you.
I also want to thank Frank Wright over at Universal Studios, who really helped in putting it together. And now on to our last selection, which is something you hear every time you go to Disneyland. It's probably one of the most viewed attractions, one of the most famous attractions there, and I'm going to let you have it from here.
Well, you know, Dave, that song, what you're talking about, shouldn't even really be on this program. because it was never in a feature film.
But we'll never tell.
But we will tell. We're glad to play it. It's one thing that's so pleasing. It really kicks to hear so many people who know the song and love it, not only here but in Europe, everywhere.
The way this song came about is quite interesting. The song was originally written on order from Walt Disney, who had agreed to do a special attraction for the World's Fair, and they were going to have a salute to the children of the world in this ride. And Walt said, we have a great idea. We'll have these audio animatronic dolls from the various countries all singing their native folk songs. And everybody agreed this was a tremendous idea. There's only one problem. You put them all together, that sounds like mush, because everybody's singing different keys, different styles, different rhythms. And so he came to us and said, could we possibly come up with a song that the children of all the world could sing? And
we got together and we wrote a song about the children. It's a Small World. And it was recorded originally for the ride. And it premiered in 1963, I believe, in New York at the World's Fair. We thought that would be the end of it. We didn't really have much hope for it having legs, as they say.
And just to tie it off before we play it, and that is, it's become one of the most gratifying songs we've ever written, and certainly one of the most joyous experiences for us to hear it all the time.
To everyone, though the mountains divide and the oceans are wide, it's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small world after all. It's a small world. It's a small, small world. It's a world after a world after all. It's a world after a world after all. It's so much that we share this time. We're aware it's a small